These videos I'm doing at the moment are focused on solution. We know the problem, we've analysed the problem. You are being kept poor on purpose. It's not because you're a failure. It's not even because you've done anything wrong. It's systemic failings that lead to your problems. I had a fantastic conversation with Douglas Rushkoff on my podcast, Under the Skin, available from Luminary. You can get it off Apple. There's a link in the description about these issues. Here, me and Douglas discuss what we can do to change the world. If you're genuinely interested in solutions, then watch this video. I want to see these videos doing as well as some of the other ones where I'm moaning and criticizing, and then I'll make more of them. These solutions are going to come from us. They're not going to come from above. They're going to become up through us, through individual awakening and through us creating new systems together. Let me know what you think of the video. When I think about the way things are, I think who benefits from things remaining like this and not changing, and it's obviously the most powerful people, because the most powerful institutions that determine how reality is. For them, it's not broken. For them, it's fine. You mentioned in your book that, you know, sort of billionaires are working on their bunkers for the post-apocalyptic hell that they're inducing. Right. So how do we, people that feel that we would like to oppose that particular version of progress, how do we challenge those interests?
I mean, a number of ways. First, I love that you use the word oppose as opposed to resist, because resistance feels to me like a relic of the electronic age, when we had, you know, rheostats and resistors and things. There are no resistors in digital. It's just either on or off. You know, you can't attenuate digital. You actually do have to oppose it. And I feel like the way we oppose it is, and no one likes to hear this, but is with distributed local solutions. You know, there is no sort of one size fits all, oh, let's elect this one president, or let's implement this policy or that. I mean, there's some economic policies. You could punish capital gains rather than punishing dividends, so that shareholders don't want just growth in their stocks, but they want continuing revenue. Because
they've cracked that game, though, haven't they? They've cracked anything that exists within those institutions and those systems. They know how to manage, lobby, and direct those processes.
Right. So anything you do at scale ends up subject to their rules, which is why then you have to try to do it not at scale and have enough people doing it that they can no longer stop us.
Are you a lecturer at Columbia University?
No, at City University of New York.
What is City University?
Yeah, public school. Yeah.
Ah, I see. Are you an anarcho-syndicalist?
I am. I didn't know what it was.
Because I've been saying I'm one for a while.
Yeah.
And I'd love someone to explain it.
I know. Well, I was in a debate with real academics about economics in Germany, and someone said, "Why, you sound like an anarcho-syndicalist," and I was like, so that night I went to the hotel and looked on Wikipedia, and I was like, oh, what is this terrible insult? And I started reading with the entry, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm saying. Yeah. So I mean, it's possible they were really evil ones or something that I don't know about. But anarcho-syndicalism, as I understand it, is basically that the whole world is made up, as much as possible, of many small cottage industries, cottage businesses that are networked together. So it's really it's consonant with what the popes were arguing after Marx. They argued for something called distributism. You know,
did they?
They did. They were asked. The popes were asked. So Marx came out and he said all this about the worker. What is the Catholic Church? What's your position on Marx? And they said, well, you know, the capitalists deserve to make money on a business, but the workers deserve to be fairly compensated. So what we think is, rather than redistributing the spoils of capitalism after the fact, let's pre-distribute the means of production before the fact. So they believe that workers should own the means of production, like a platform cooperative. What if the Uber drivers owned Uber? Then instead of simply doing the R&D, the research and development for their robot replacements, they're doing R&D for their own company. So then when the robots replace them, they'll sit back and earn the revenue on the company that they built with their driving and their knowledge. So anarcho-syndicalism is kind of like that. It's like if you don't grow businesses large for its own sake, you just grow a business as big as it has to be to do what it does. So if you open a pizzeria and you're serving your town and the next town wants a pizzeria, You go, oh, here's my recipe. Go start a pizzeria. And once there are all these different pizzerias, you end up in a network and you can support each other in ways better and live a better life. You get to make pizza instead of being the manager of some pizza chain. You get to do what you do.
You'd get some time off as well. Go do your activities. Like I'll go for a walk or some fishing or do some jiu-jitsu or do some arrangements with dry flowers, some crafts, instead of like, I've got to make another pizzeria. I'll kill that guy that took my recipes.
Well, you have to now, but you have to grow in order to stay alive at this point. If you've taken any investment, you have to keep growing, or the rents are going up, or there's a Jamba Juice going next door and now your rent is up.
I was looking at the high street and I thought, like, how hard it must be to start a business, the ones that are not identifiable chains, they're just businesses, like someone's Now Bar or whatever. And I was thinking, God, I bet these people are all in heavy debt. In actuality, I bet each one of these units represents a great deal of debt. And it's precisely because that rather brilliant PayPal model wasn't taken up, that the means of production are controlled by the capitalists and the workers get their share of the spoils after the fact. That thing that Gandhi said prior to the independence of India? He said, like, there's no point in us getting India independent, then replicating the colonial model that we've just fought to throw off. It's a country of 70,000 villages, each of which should be independent, run on its own craft-based or like economies, and we should only trade with each other where necessary, and this is how it should be. So that's anarcho-syndicalism as well. Yeah,
and part of what digital did was it helped us see that the nation state was itself a fiction.
It's just made up, isn't it?
Well, it really is, though. I mean, cities were real, because those are cities are sort of like humans, like termite mounds. We grew organismically.
Coral.
Exactly, like a coral reef is a city, but the nation state was invented. There's this moment I keep going back to in most of my books when the end of the medieval era, people were getting wealthy. They had just done the Crusades. They came back from the Crusades. They opened up the equivalent of the Moorish bazaar that we called the market. We brought local currencies that were issued in the morning and they would expire in the evening, so they were optimized for the velocity of money. And the middle class got wealthy. That's what they called the bourgeois. The burghers became the bourgeois. And the aristocracy had to figure out, how do we squash this renaissance? So they invented chartered monopolies, which said nobody's allowed to do business in an industry unless they are chartered by the king. So now you have to, instead of making shoes and selling them, you've got to work for His Majesty's Royal Shoemaker. Now you're an employee selling your time instead of creating value. The second thing they came up with was central currency. All the local currencies were made illegal, and now you had to borrow money from a central treasury at interest in order to transact. And if you have to borrow at interest, it means that you've got to pay back more than you borrowed, which means now the economy has to grow. And we've been living with that, 11th, 12th, 13th century economic operating system for close to 1,000 years. And now we're going into a digital age using that OS, and we're telling all our algorithms, all our platforms, this is how the economy works. So look what happens. Humanity can't survive digital capitalism at this pace.
And we're kind of told that it's nature, that it's an expression of an absolute truth, that it's not simply a variant, one of many alternatives. And generally speaking, the people that want you to think there are no alternatives are the people that benefit from things staying the same way. But
right.
That you've described as sort of a lovely utopia. It's not nature. It's just an idea.
It is. I mean, and then, certain free market libertarians will say, oh, well, Darwin showed us that reality is survival of the fittest individual. And Darwin didn't write that at all. Darwin was writing about the different species' ability to coordinate and collaborate amongst each other and with the other ones in order to survive and thrive. We know, I was taught in school that trees would compete for sunlight and the big one would shade the little one and then the little one would die. It's like, it's not what happens at all. Trees are actually sharing resources under the ground through a network of mycelia. So the big tree that's getting sun is passing its nutrients to the little one. Then when the leaves fall off the big one, the little one's an evergreen and it sends nutrients back to the big one. And the mushrooms are taking a service fee for the transaction.
I'll send you some nutrients, but when the leaves fall, would you be so kind as to send some...
Of course I will, big guy. Hey, fuck you! Like, how beautiful. Like, yes, we narrativize nature, biology, in order to fit in with a pre-existing economic ideology.
Right.
Here's a little one that in our country. We had these things, the red squirrels. Oh, we loved the red squirrels. Lovely little things they were, bushy tails red. And then the American squirrel came over here on boats and killed the red squirrel.
Oh,
now there are no red squirrels.
Sorry.
Later though, we discovered that actually what happened is that there'd been loads of disruption of the red squirrels' environments, through development, and it was just a sort of a contributory, secondary, ancillary factor that there had been this other competing group of squirrels, i.e. an immigrant narrative was utilised because it sort of is it's resonant like that. And the fact that you would be taught, sort of biology in that way, or horticulture, or whatever particular discipline that would be, with those kind of biases, shows you how entrenched these ideas are.
Right, but that's, in some ways, that's why I'm trying to offer a different approach to cure. In other words, that it's really easy to jump into this almost allopathic model of society. Like, oh, what's the disease? The disease is capitalism. The disease is Trump. The disease is right wing. The disease is, or the disease is computers and digital. So let's just go off digital because, oh, they're so bad and they're hurt. It's like, well, wait a minute. What about looking at the vitality of the patient instead? So rather than coming up with a new algorithm to filter dangerous weaponized memes from my teen's Instagram account, what if I just make my teen and our culture more resilient to this? What if we, so I'm trying to kind of promote our humanity so we're less vulnerable to the insanity, rather than looking at the insanity as the problem to be fixed.
Yeah, you might be right about that. So how then do we promote the vitality of the patient?
Well, first, by building up, it starts to sound sad, but by building up our tolerance for being with each other. I get every year, I've only been teaching now 5 years, and this is the 5th year. And every year, every semester, I get more notes on the first day of class from kids whose psychotherapists have given them a note saying, please excuse Johnny from class presentations because he's got too much anxiety to stand.
How old are they?
College age.
What's that, 18?
Yeah, 18 to 22. And I think, wow. What they needed was a public school system that didn't look at itself as increasing little workers' utility value. There's all these principals and heads of universities that are meeting with CEOs to find out, what do you want your workers to know? Do you want them to know Excel? Do you want them to know Python or Java? And then they go into the classroom and teach the things that the companies want, which is the opposite purpose of public education, right? Public education was for the co-worker to have some dignity, so that he could go home at night after working all day and be able to appreciate a novel or participate in democracy. And now it's an externalized cost of companies. So we throw, iPads and God knows what in the classroom. I think, we've got to reacquaint ourselves with one another. Take, if you can, 10, 15 minutes a week and sit with another person, learn to make eye contact again. Don't expect to have your mirror neurons fire or your oxytocin released by staring at someone on a FaceTime or Skype video. That there's, being in a room, making contact with a person it leverages 500,000 years of evolution that does increase your vitality. So that's why, that's was the whole team, the whole team idea is to help people understand that being human is a team sport, and that being social is when you get healthy. That's what it is. And these imitation forms of social life are basically like porn is to sex. It's really not the same thing, and it's not enhancing it's not building solidarity. It's not giving us the power we need to combat what we have to fight.
It compounds the conditions that make us easily manipulated into little solitary units of energy. Also.
Well, if you enjoyed that, maybe you'll consider going over to Luminary and subscribing to my podcast, Under the Skin. I have deep conversations like that every week about these issues. How do we change the world? How do we change ourselves? That's the only things that interest me. If you want to watch more videos like this, have a look at that one. If you want to watch more videos that help you relax, unwind, meditate, sign up to my side channel, Awakening, for more free content. Go to russellbrand.com right now and sign up to my mailing list so me and you can communicate directly. We have to stay connected. Thanks for watching. Hit me with a comment below as well and give us a thumbs up and a like.